People who had sex with a celebrity. How was it?
It doesn't.
Friend hooked up with Snoop and he only wanted to go down on her for hours. She said the whole time she was thinking, OMG, Snoop Dogg is eating me out right now, lol.
It doesn't.
My college roommate slept with Post Malone. She said he was nice and it was exceptionally average.
It doesn't.
Someone here definitely has a kid with Nick Cannon.
It doesn't.
One of the old ladies in my grandma's dementia ward used to tell this story to anyone who would listen about a time she once gave a handjob to Engelbert Humperdinck backstage at a concert. She was very enthusiastic in her recounting of this story. Take this for what you will.
It doesn't.
Vivian Vance pulled a dick like she was yanking a carrot out of the dirt.
It doesn't.
I slept with Burton Cummings from the Guess Who. He was commando and there were smoked blunts in the ashtray. He also gave me the best oral sex. No one ever lived up to what he did, until about 30 years late. Other guys were good, but not that good. His crew told me he always picks one female, who seems to know his lyrics, out of the crowd, to sing to for the concert. It is nothing where he calls them out, just notices them and sings to them. The woman next to me was telling her friend how he kept looking at her while singing. I did not correct her. When he took a bow, I pointed at myself and then to him. He nodded. The next day I took him sightseeing. I mentioned he had not sung These Eyes the night before. He sang it for me. Maybe about 8 years later I saw him in Times Square. I stopped him and said hi. He knew who I was and even gave me the year we met. Overall, a good experience.
It doesn't.
My best friend had a one-night stand with John Stamos. She said he was very romantic and passionate. For just being a one-night stand.
It doesn't.
She's currently a national-level news journalist on TV. This was while she was still a cadet. After she got hers, she literally rolled over and fell asleep. Woke up the next morning to her in my shorts and a t-shirt she took from my wardrobe. Danced her way out of my place to a cab. Literally danced, while still wearing my clothes. Later on, one of her friends was knocking on my door. Apparently, the dress she wore was borrowed, so she sent her friend over to collect. I handed it over, along with the shoes and underwear. Her friend asked what she was supposed to do with those, and I kinda said it's a package deal as I'm not that guy that would keep those as trophies. Only saw her once again in the nightlife district of my city. She was stealing street sign. Then, years later, she's on the news almost every night.
It doesn't.
Not me, but I know someone who fucked Pauly Shore. Like a solid 12 years after Biodome Pauly Shore. She literally describes it as exactly what you'd expect banging Pauly Shore is like.
It doesn't.
My mom dated Michael Hutchence from INXS when they were both teenagers. She met him at one of their shows when INXS was a small band and she quickly became buddies with them. They would oftentimes pick her up in their van and she'd go to shows with them. After a year or two my mom moved on from them and they blew up in popularity shortly after she left. She didn't speak to them for years but bumped into Michael at Sydney Airport not long before he died and he remembered her dearly. They shared hugs and caught up for a good while in the airport. My mom claims they were just friends, but we all know the truth. My mom has been tight-lipped about it all, but described him as shy. Edit. No, he isn't my dad. My birth doesn't match up with the timelines. I checked. Tears of joy.
It doesn't.
Terrence Howard tried to fuck my ex. Went into the store she was working in to buy soap for his hotel room and put his hotel key on the counter for her when he paid. She slid it right back.
It doesn't.
I matched with a woman who was a top 50 tennis player on Tinder while I was at a conference. I figured it was a bot or just a scammer, but since they agreed to meet me at the bar across from my hotel, I figured what was the worst that could happen. Chatted for 20 minutes and she agreed to go upstairs. I was a bit intimidated as I am not an athlete, but I proceeded to give her a solidly mediocre 25 minutes of lovin'. She then left and unmatched me. So I guess it was fine. Standard first-time sex with an extra dose of awkward from my end, where the person was better looking and a lot more fit than I'm used to, but otherwise pretty much the same thing as non-celebrity sex.
It doesn't.
One of my exes hooked up with Timothée Chalamet. She said he was cool. As Drake once said, I'm upset.
It doesn't.
Alright, so my mom was an actress and a model. Her roster has Robert Downey Jr., Jazzy Jeff, Will Smith, and Lenny Kravitz. Will Smith and Jazzy Jeff were separate times. Probably others that I don't know about. I don't know many details of any of them. RDJ was during his heavier drug issues and she didn't have the nicest things to say about him. Lenny sent her Christmas, general holiday cards every year until she died, so I guess it was good enough that they stayed friendly. Edit. So I will share this tiny hint of who my mom is, but I promise you guys will not guess. If you figure it out, please don't dox me. She was in a movie with RDJ and that's how they met. She was in another movie with Steve Martin. She had so many modeling jobs but was most famously on a book cover, several billboards, and magazine covers. She also was a makeup artist and started her own makeup line. You don't have to be rude and call her names. Women, even mothers, are allowed to have sex and as much or as little as they want. Yes, we talked about sex, but as I said before, I don't know all of the details. She was an incredible human and I love and miss her very much.
It doesn't.
My friend fucked Bam Margera and Bill Vallo. Not at the same time. Said they both sucked.
It doesn't.
A close friend slept with a Backstreet Boy, AJ, in his hotel room after a show in our city. She said there was about 10 minutes of sex and 3 hours listening to his new personal music project on his laptop. Both sucked.
It doesn't.
I was dating a guy, and one night, he started playing a song by a somewhat obscure band I loved. I told him that I was really surprised and happy that he knew this song. He said, "Wait, do you actually not know who I am?" He was in the band. Anyway, we kept dating for 10 years and then I married him. Sex is 10 out of 10.
It doesn't.
I had a neighbor that blew Bruno Mars. Her husband took exception to that and bailed.
It doesn't.
My older brother ditched me trying to hook up with Joan Jett. I was 15 or 16 at the time and she was in town for the Indy 500 or 4th of July. Can't remember which one exactly. But we ran into her and she was extremely nice and talked to us for a couple of hours before she performed. Next thing I know, my brother's friend is giving me a ride home because he had some other plans. Turns out she was just being an actual genuinely nice person and my brother read that as her hitting on him. Wish I could have been there for the rejection. Open mouth smile.
It doesn't.
She is a rather famous broadcast personality in the UK. Went out with her for about 6 months in my 20s. Whenever she's on TV and I turn on with my wife or my parents, I feel really embarrassed somehow and want to turn over but at the same time pretend not to notice. Kind of awkward. Edit. I realize I haven't directly answered the question. The sex was good. She had a few kinks that I thought were somewhat weird, though realized later weren't all that weird really. She was lovely. I really messed things up but am happy with how things later ended up and I'm not hung up on her or anything. Although part of why I cringe somehow is imagining how others may expect that I regret no longer being with her.
It doesn't.
I'm surprised to see so many, "No one on Reddit has slept with a celebrity" comments. I work in the film industry and let me tell y'all, a significant portion of actors are horndogs like everyone else, and sleep with a lot of crew and extras. Woman shrugging, medium light skin tone.
It doesn't.
My ex is from Toronto and hooked up with The Weeknd. She said he was nice and asked if he could come on her face. She said yes.
It doesn't.
A friend of mine thought she had sex with Kevin Costner, but it was just some sleazy lawyer from Albuquerque.
It doesn't.
As a blind woman, I was surprised at the number of celebrities that hang out at my local bar and keep hitting on me.
If it doesn't,
Unfortunately slept with Adam Levine 13 years ago. It was terrible and cringy. But what was more terrible, cringy, was seeing his texts leak with that girl last year and knowing I had fucked a man that says things like, "I'm going to need to see the booty."
if it doesn't,
My girlfriend fucked Evan Dando while we were on a break. So by the transitive property, I fucked Winona Ryder. 0 would not recommend.
if it doesn't,
My band was on tour in 2010 and we played Spaceland in LA. Kesha was there and was already pretty well known. I had no idea who she was, but we had a friend in common and all hung out that night. She and I hooked up in my hotel room and it was unmemorable, I'm sure for her, too, as we were both pretty wasted. Left town the next day and we haven't spoken since.
if it doesn't,
Judge Judy was as you'd expect.
if it doesn't,
Friend of a friend allegedly slept with the Kings of Leon singer back in the day. Small package and gave her an STD was the report. Sex is on Fire always makes me laugh for this reason.
if it doesn't,
The worst part about blowing Willie Nelson was afterwards when he told me he wasn't actually Willie Nelson.
if it doesn't,
You're expecting the internet to be honest with a question like that?
if it doesn't,
Friend of a friend blew John Mayer and he had explosive diarrhea around about the time he climaxed and shat all over her shirt. She had to leave the hotel room without a top on. This happened like 15 years ago and I've never been able to associate him with anything else. Fathers, be good to your daughters, lest they be pooped on by John Mayer in a hotel room.
if it doesn't,
I had sex with Eartha Kitt in an airplane bathroom.
if it doesn't,
It was good, but she goes to a different school so you wouldn't know her.
if it doesn't,
In the 60s, I made love to many, many people, often outdoors, in the mud and the rain, and it's possible a celebrity slipped in. There would be no way of knowing.